Ce qui se passe dans les bois est un véritable podcast sur la criminalité. Nous discutons d'événements qui sont souvent de nature violente. La discrétion de l'auditeur est conseillée. What Happens in the Woods is a true crime podcast. We discuss events that are often violent in nature. Listener's discretion is advised.
How many innocent people are in prison right now? Hundreds? Thousands? Can anyone know the answer to that question? Probably not. But even one person who is in prison for a crime they didn't commit is one too many. Our case today is just one of many cases where the person convicted was not the actual person who committed the crime. It happens often in places all over around the world. Today we talk about the conviction of Steve Titus, a 31-year-old who sort of fit a description given by an assault victim and was pegged early on by investigators as the only possible suspect. He lost everything because of it. This case leads up to the end of the season, but also to a collaboration effort with podcast True Crime Cat Lawyer on these types of cases. Beginning in April, we will bring you monthly episodes of cases that need to be discussed and highlighted on this topic. Unfortunately, we've found no shortage of them. Join us today as we highlight the wrongful conviction of Steve Titus. This is True Crime Podcast, What Happens in the Woods, with your hosts, Jess and Bryce. Let's get started.
Hello, campers, and welcome to almost the last episode in this season. We are definitely glad you could make it. First of all, let me welcome back Mara.
Oh, hello, everyone.
Hello, Mara. She'll be with me this episode because Bryce can't be here. So thank you for your sacrifice tonight, Mara.
Well, I'm just the backup, you know.
I mean, you're
the second choice.
You're the second choice. I'm sorry. I mean, I was prepared to do it on my own.
I'm sure I have a fan base out there that's missed me. So.
Yes, I'm sure. So, give the people what they want.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe you should involve yourself a little more sometimes.
Oh my gosh. Shots fired.
Oh, all right. Well, I mean, thank you. And seriously, because I could just sit in here and talk to myself, but, it might get a little crazy.
I think the day that you do that, we have to have a little talk.
Intervention time?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, here we are. So I wanted to say things have been busy. Things, to say the least. Things
That's
have been
an understatement, I feel.
Yeah. There's a lot behind the scenes of anybody's lives that they don't share on social media. And I'm not a big sharer on my personal social media and the podcast social media. So there are a lot of things going on. And when I say busy, I mean crazy busy. Like I have been working like 50 or more hours a week for the last couple of months at my day job. And, I'm just trying to deal with all the extra stuff. Bryce has been here, not here. There's a lot going on, family related things. And it's been a lot going on, rough start of the year. And it's difficult and it's tiring. And the only reason I say this, I don't want sympathy. I'm just saying because our social media engagement has just basically gone to the shitter. And I'm so sorry. Like I didn't even put a post out on the last episode that we released. I did absolutely nothing for that. And people still listened. They still knew to come and find us and they still listened and that's great. So, I mean, thank you so much for everybody that just is so tuned into us that they know we're releasing. I appreciate that. I also did not post anything about the winner of the contest that we had for our podiversary, which was very lackluster. I'm not going to lie. Like, our celebration of that was just so like, hey, yeah, it's our podiversary. Happy 2 years. That's it. We're so thankful for, 2 years of doing this. Just doesn't even seem like we've been here 2 years. It's crazy. I feel like we just started this like 2 months ago, and we're just, I don't know. It just doesn't, the time doesn't.
It doesn't feel like 2 years.
It doesn't feel like 2 years. I don't want anybody to think that we're not like excited or happy, but it just, everything else was just overwhelming, and it just coincided with us needing to handle things at home. So our winner officially is T. James 13, and he was already notified. So Tyler already knows he has $60 to spend on podcast merch, and I appreciate everybody that, entered and put their name in for that. I thought I had scheduled a post to put that information out there to acknowledge Tyler, and I guess I didn't schedule it right because it didn't happen, and I didn't think about it until just a couple of days ago. Like, oh yeah, that didn't happen. It's a mess. Speaking of which, there are a couple of additions to the merch in anticipation of summer and warmer weather. So head over and check that out. And right now we are, Bryce had put up a link on the website, but we are donating any proceeds to from merch purchases that are going to be donated to organizations that are helping humanitarian efforts for the people in the Ukraine. And we will be donating some of our personal money to Doctors Without Borders. And I'm also looking in to an animal rescue group that has been taking animals, because as people are having to leave in the Ukraine, they're having to leave their animals behind. Oh. And it just, one thing I think everybody should have is access to medical care. And when this type of thing happens, they need to be able to be seen. People are leaving without medication, without, and that bothers me that they're having to leave, but they're not getting their basic care, food, water, medical, and shelter. But I'm so sad that they're having to leave behind their animals.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and those are some of the organizations that don't. Everybody donates to the Red Cross, and I'm not going to say the Red Cross doesn't do. They don't do good things, I'm sure, but by the time they take the money that is donated to them for specific things, they have like an overwhelming amount of supplies and money that never reach that destination. Is some of the concerns that I've read about them, is that by the time they're asking for donations for certain things, like when the floods happened, when Hurricane Katrina happened, and they have all these stores of donations that never make it to the people who need the help. Because by the time the donations are making their way, the people don't need them anymore, or they just never get distributed. So I've heard some things about the Red Cross. I don't know about the International Red Cross, but I thought, who can we donate to that I know now needs money now or needs help now, and will do good with it. So those are the ones that I've looked into. If there's any specific that anybody has, let me know, because like I said, I want just to put a little bit more money that way. So we would love to beef that up by adding any proceeds from merch sales from now until April 15th. So here's about the time when I would ask Bryce if he has any updates, but he's not here and he would say no anyways. So I'm going to tell you that the country outside of the U.S. in the lead as of recording is Canada. So
our friends to the north.
Yes. So thank you so much for always, greatly appreciate your support, always supporting us. And I really hope someday that I am able to come and visit Canada. I
Me
would
too.
Yeah, I would love to go. I need to get my passport in order.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
we
always
live so
wanted to go.
close.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I told your dad I wanted to take the ferry up, and he was like, no thanks. And I was
That
like,
sounds not fun.
it sounds amazing to go out on the water and like see the islands and the coastline. And what do you mean?
That doesn't sound fun to me.
Okay, well, I guess I'll take the ferry on my own.
Okay.
And I'll meet you guys there. Jeez.
Okay.
I don't know. Somebody let me know. If you've taken the ferry, is it worth it?
Like,
I don't want to go if it's not going to be worth it.
How long of a ride would that be on
I don't
a ferry?
think it's that long.
I don't know.
I don't think it's that long. I really don't. I'm not saying I'm going to get to like I'm not going to cross over and get like on the mainland. I'm saying there's like a ferry to like islands and stuff. I don't know. I need to look into it more. I feel like it would be fun. It's an adventure and it's something I've never done before.
Go off. Live your best life.
Live my best life on the ferry to Canada. Anyways. All right. And also with that, my update is not really an update, but just kind of a confirmation of something we've been discussing. So it ties into this episode specifically. We are extremely excited to confirm our bonus episode with Elise and Winston from True Crime Cat Lawyer will be released in April. And this is a 2-part episode. We will release both episodes on each of our podcasts for our listeners. So you may be asking, how does it tie in with this episode? Well, we were so excited to be working with one another. We decided to do a series of collaboration episodes on wrongful convictions. The first case we have for you is pretty phenomenal, and it's also not as widely discussed. And I'm really sure that a lot of people are going to be just as invested in listening to it as we were to research it and bring it to you. So be on the lookout for the dates and when the releases are on our social media. Elise is a lot better about her social media than I am. So you definitely will get updates, but I will make sure that date is out there. We tentatively have it for the 13th of April, but now that it's a 2-part episode, we got to figure out what that second date is. So, all right. I think that's all that I have.
All the housekeeping.
All the housekeeping is out of the way. Are you ready for me to bring you a case? You ready, Mara?
Ready. My ready pants are on.
Okay. Real quick, there is a mention of sexual assault in this case. I don't go into many details because there just aren't very many. So even the topic can be distressing for people. So if you are if that is something that is upsetting to you or triggering to you, please just listen responsibly as usual. All right, let's go back to the 80s, to the beginning of the 80s.
Okay. I was not on this earth.
You were not. And you were not a thought because at the time of this, I was barely 2 years old.
But I will, imagination.
So we are going back to the night of October 12th, 1980. A young girl, 17 years old at the time, was hitchhiking on Pacific Avenue South that evening. A blue car pulled over. The driver was a male about mid to late 30s. And he was very smartly dressed at the time in a cream 3-piece suit. And all I can picture is John Travolta from the cover of the Saturday Night Fever album in his like disco outfit 3-piece suit.
Oh, God.
Everybody should kind of know that reference, even if you are not as old as I am. I know that ages me, but you know what I'm talking about, right, Mara?
Yeah.
Maybe that is solely just because you are my child, and I totally dig the disco.
We may never know.
We may never know. It definitely is. You say cream 3-piece suit, and I automatically was like, was it John Travolta?
I hope not.
I would hope not. Yes. No, he's not connected to this case whatsoever, other than in my imagination, this mysterious driver suddenly looks like him.
Okay.
All right. So the girl gets, into the car and she gets a ride. And I mean, let me just say at this time, even now to this day, the Pacific Highway it's not the best place to be. It is a very well-known place where sex workers, and I've also heard sex traffickers, are very prominent in that area, on this area of the Pacific Highway that is kind of near SeaTac. Mm-hmm. It's not a place that you should be out walking at night and hitchhiking. It's not. And I'm not assuming that she was a sex worker. I'm just saying that the area is not safe.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what she's doing out there. It's just not safe. And it just worries me because I don't know why I'm worried this is in the past, but the 80s were still a time when people would hitchhike.
Yeah.
And it just didn't occur to everybody like, hey, this isn't safe. I never know who's going to pick me up, because for every time it goes wrong, it goes right.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. I'm glad that we don't do that anymore. I'm glad people are, that's not what people do anymore to get around.
I mean,
Ish.
Yes and no. Like, we get into strangers' cars now.
Yeah, like Lyft and Uber. Yeah.
But,
yeah. And
I mean,
hitchhiking
is...
Well, we assume that those people are going to be safe, but I mean, we all, taxi drivers and things like that, we don't know who they are.
Different form of hitchhiking almost.
Yeah, I mean, sure. And you're paying for that person to take you someplace, and they could be a psychopath.
Yeah.
Yeah. Valid.
I have never once been like, yeah, I really just want to hitchhike.
No, the thought of getting into somebody's car that I don't know if that, I don't want to say I ever had like a experience or something as a child, but it gives me anxiety. Like even as a child, that would give me anxiety. The thought of getting in somebody's car that I didn't know. I didn't like it.
That's alarming.
But I'm fairly certain that nothing like ever happened. I mean, I got locked in the trunk of Mom's car one time, but
okay.
Yeah, it was the 80s.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
She had a big old, I forget what kind of car it was, but the trunk was enormous. And we were getting laundry from our apartment over to Grandma and Grandpa's house to do it. And I don't know, I got into the trunk and I don't know. Okay. She pulled out the laundry and I think I stayed behind, and I don't know. I don't even know how it happened. I really don't, because I was probably like 3 or 4 at the time. I wasn't very old.
I don't think I've ever heard this story.
Yeah, that's probably because we just don't mention it.
We don't talk about that.
Shit happened in the 80s, all right? I mean, whatever. I survived. It's fine. I don't know why, but it's always just been a distressing thing for me. So I'm glad that is not something that a lot of people do anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are laws and things. So she's in the car. The man tells her that he's going to Tacoma, and apparently her mother lives in Tacoma. It doesn't say whether that was her destination as well. The information is given. Instead, he drives to some off the beaten path roads out in the middle of nowhere. The car is parked on a dirt road, and then the man proceeds to tell this young 17-year-old girl to undress under the threat of a knife, or it might have been a screwdriver that he held to her neck.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, she is forced to perform oral sex as well as have vaginal intercourse with this man. She is then told to get out of the car, get dressed, and then wait for him to leave. As soon as the car drives off, she hightails it to the nearest house that has its lights on. So the Port of Seattle police are called in to this house at 7:22 p.m. is when the call comes into the station. This is due to the jurisdiction of where the crime was committed. So it wasn't Seattle. It wasn't necessarily sheriff's territory. It was Port of Seattle. The officers respond very quickly. The victim was, obviously very distressed. And the officers note that she's crying, she's really upset, but she doesn't outwardly look like she was beaten or hurt or, there wasn't a struggle, anything like that. She guides them to where the crime took place down the dirt road, where the car was parked, and she gives them details about the car and the man driving it. She states that the car was a compact royal blue car. It had velvet bucket seats. She didn't know what kind of car it was. I know, velvet bucket seats. Can you imagine?
That's something.
That is something. It was a newer car, as there was a temporary paper for the license plate in the back window. And she thought that it started with 667 or 776. She wasn't sure.
Those are very different.
Yeah, I mean, when you're glancing and your mind is frantic, though, I can see where the details are lost. I can see.
Don't know how that's gonna help them so much.
Right. But, well, yeah. She states that there was also some kind of like necklace or chain hanging from the rear view mirror. She describes the man as about 6 foot, which I'm not sure how you would get that if he never exited the car. But then again, I don't know that he did or didn't.
Yeah.
It from everything that I read, it makes it seem like he did not. She describes him as about 6 foot, medium build, shoulder length, light brown hair, and he had a full beard. And as I mentioned before, he was decked out in that 3-piece suit. So he was dressed for the evening.
I just want to know where he was going, what he was doing.
God only knows. It's the 80s.
Where's he wearing this 3-piece suit?
Probably going down the road to do a line of crack or something.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I mean, cocaine was a big deal.
God.
I don't know. I'm assuming things.
For real.
That sounds horrible. Well, he's a criminal who just, assaulted somebody sexually. I don't really care about his feelings at this point. Sorry.
Valid.
Detectives start searching the scene. Meanwhile, the victim is taken to the hospital to be treated and any evidence gathered that they can. At that time, though, they wouldn't have taken like DNA. Yeah, there wasn't really. They could look for fingerprints. They could look for hair, fiber, that kind of stuff. But they weren't progressed enough in the 80s to be able to they probably would have known if semen was present or not, but they wouldn't have been able to do anything with it at all, Not anything that would trace it back to a suspect. Let's put it that way. They're taking photographs of the scene, and they're taking, they later come back out and take photos of the tire tracks where the car was parked. Mm-hmm. Good thinking. Good detective work, right? Officers also begin a search of nearby businesses, keeping a lookout for cars that may match the description of the one the victim described. I mean, it's the evening. It's the Pacific Highway. People are coming and going. It's a known area. So they're thinking maybe this person's out, cruising the strip, basically. Maybe looking for a potential next victim. So why not? Let's just go drive around, patrol, search, see if we can find anything. He's also dressed to impress, so that tells me he was headed someplace. And then they come across a blue Chevy Chevette. I always love saying Chevy Chevette. It's like calling somebody Dick Richards, you know what I mean? It's like Chevy Chevette. Uh-huh. And it has bucket seats, parked at the Raintree Restaurant and Lounge on the Pacific Highway South. There is a Playboy bunny air freshener hanging from the rear view mirror. It just seals the deal. They're like, this is it. We found it, right?
Okay.
It isn't long before a man and a woman exit together from the lounge and they head to the car. And the man, they could see that he fit the description. As the couple get in the car and they drive off, police are right behind them and light them up. Both are asked to exit the car and then they're questioned away from one another. The man, Steve Titus, is very cooperative with the officers, as is his fiance, Mona. They had been out celebrating that evening, just having a good time after he had picked her up from work. He doesn't think much of it when they claim that a man fitting his description is being sought after in a sexual assault issue. And he even lets the officers search his car, take his photo, as well as photos of his tires. He's just Like, nothing's going to come of this. And if I'm being helpful, then I'm being helpful. He doesn't ask if they have a warrant. He doesn't ask if he's under arrest. He doesn't, he's just, hey, yeah, sure, whatever you need.
Yeah.
Yeah. He lets them do this. He even jokingly says, can you take one of me and my fiance? I mean, it's really not a big deal.
Yeah.
Eventually, the officers set them on their way, and there's really nothing more that he thinks is going to come of it. Titus's photo, along with 5 other men's mugshots, are shown to the victim the next day. Keep in mind, his is not a mugshot.
Yeah.
It is unclear if the police stopped patrolling Pacific Highway after pulling him over. The other 5 photos are not from traffic stops, but actual mugshots of people already in the system. And I question here the logic in that. And I mean, I don't have much more information on it, but were these men recently released? Were they, did they have a history of sexual assault? It seems like more than just picking out some photos that matched a description.
Yeah.
From, your directory of criminals. It just seems like those are details that maybe the police should keep in mind, and maybe they did, and it's just not recorded anywhere. But those are my concerns, just initially hearing that that's what they did.
Yeah.
Is just did a photo lineup with one guy and then 5 random people. Yeah. So that tells me that they didn't stop anybody else and look any further than him. Really.
Interesting.
Yeah. I cannot say for sure, but that is my assumption based off where this goes. So the victim was certain that Steve Titus was the man who had assaulted her from looking at the photos. And she claimed, quote, "This one is the closest one. It has to be this one."
The closest one.
Right. Also very questionable.
Yeah.
I mean, let me just say, I want victims to be able to identify their attackers, obviously.
Yeah.
That is a crucial thing. If they are able to do that with all certainty, then that is very important information.
Yeah. But certainty.
Right, with certainty. But it's just, like, honey, if you're not sure, you can't say. Like,
Yeah,
it's this one, it has to be this one.
He's the closest one. We'll just go with that one.
Right.
Like, it's not that type of thing right now.
Out of the 6 options that they gave you, he might have been the closest one. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But did anybody try to look further? This is why this is the shit that pisses me off, because you're essentially damaging somebody's reputation. Their life is in your hands at this point. And the police are assuming that you have your information correct. Never mind that you were a victim of a violent crime. Rape is violent. I don't care if you don't put up a fight. It's still a violent crime.
Yeah.
The scars mentally from that and the trauma mentally from that has an effect on what you remember and how you remember it.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine the police not wanting to go further and say, okay, well, if you're not 100% sure, let's keep looking. It was just like, no, this is the closest guy. It has to be him then, right? Because the police had presented just these 6 photos to her. She's probably assuming that these are her choices.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would hope that that's not how it works now.
Yeah, I just would wonder if she said anything like, yeah, I'm not for certain.
Right.
Like, would they, I don't know, was that said? Was that discussed? Like, I'm really not certain.
Right.
But I think that's the closest one. Like, if that's the response, I don't think we should be pursuing this person.
Right. And,
like you said.
That's, it's a huge red flag to me.
Yeah.
Just huge red flag. I feel like the police should have stepped back at that point and said, okay, well, if you're not 100% sure and it sounds like you have some doubts, let's find more people to look at.
Yeah.
Could have done a lineup in person, could have done, I don't know, more photos, more, I don't know.
I kind of wonder why they didn't do a lineup in person. I mean, you see it on TV shows. I'm not sure that they really do that. But, you have a lineup in person and they make them, like, speak.
Right.
Like that could have been very helpful.
I think that is something that happens. I don't think it happens like it happens on TV.
Yeah.
But I do think that is a viable way. If I also don't think and I could be wrong. In the 1980s, I don't think they had the two-way glass where the the victim. I don't know for sure. I maybe could research when that became a thing. It wasn't one of the details that I was really focusing on, but I would think that it's more for her safety and for her comfort that they did photos, and that I understand as well. Because to be in somebody's presence that you think has attacked you is very distressing, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Just her statement, if that is how she said it and what she said, which I read that in a few different areas, exactly word for word as I read it, that's concerning.
Yeah. I just feel like there could have been more details explored.
Right. So it's definitely, that is not what happens. They are feeling very confident in this victim's choice, and police proceed in looking at Steve Titus as their only suspect from basically that day on. He is arrested at his job 2 days later.
Ugh.
Yeah. They impound the Chevy Chevette, which is a car that is provided by his employer for his job. So Titus is actually a district manager for Ivor's seafood restaurant food chain.
Oh.
And the car was owned and maintained for him by by corporate, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So police lead him away from his job in handcuffs, and they take him down to the Port of Seattle station to be questioned. That looks super great.
Yeah.
For his reputation.
Yeah.
And when questioned about his timeline that day, Titus tells detectives that he spent the afternoon with his parents at their home in North Seattle, SeaTac, sorry. It had been his father's birthday that day, and the family had gathered to celebrate. That evening at about 6:10, he left to head home, and he arrived at his apartment in Kent at 6:30. Again, he is fully cooperative. He even agrees to do a polygraph test. He doesn't feel like there's anything to hide, and he is pretty sure that this is a mistake and it's going to get resolved.
Yeah.
And it's those damn polygraph tests that we always talk about.
Yeah.
And definitely, at 1980, yeah, if you failed a polygraph, you were screwed.
Yeah.
Because it was, they were the end-all be-all to evidence.
Unfortunately.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I will tell you just how wrong all of this goes for Steve Titus. Police have taken a statement from Steve Titus about his whereabouts on the day of October 12th, 1980. He has agreed to do a polygraph as the detectives claim that they have all sorts of evidence against him, and they start laying out what they have, and he's refuting it. He says, no, that's absolutely, I don't know anything that you're talking about. And they say if he passes a lie detector test that he's free to go. He must not be their man. If not, then he will be arrested and, the courts will decide. He is told he failed the test.
Did he fail the test?
There's not much mentioned on that. They later on talk to reporters from the Seattle Times talked to the person that administered the test, and he was like, well, is it infallible? No. But nobody, I'll get to that. It's a bunch of bullshit.
Okay.
The official statement he made in October to detectives that are questioning him changes a little by the time that is typed up, which is only days before his trial begins in February of 1981. So the detective did not type up the official report that was given in October, on the 14th of October, until February.
Okay.
Right. In that statement, the information police claim Steve gave them was that he got home at 6:55 p.m. on the 12th, not 6:30. According to Steve, it also incorrectly gives details on the route that he used to get home from his parents. He claims that he went home to his apartment in Kent by way of Renton. The police put in their statement, once it's typed up, because it takes forever, that he took I-5 and the Pacific Highway to reach Kent, which isn't that convenient that he's on the Pacific Highway, which is where the girl claims to have been picked up by him on the Pacific Highway. Going into the trial, his friends and family rally around him. His fiance stands by him as well. And everybody's thinking, there's a mistake. He's an innocent man. He's not going to be convicted. Hopes are especially high when the crime lab, the state crime lab report on the tires comes back. And it states that the car that Steve drove was not a match of the tread. The photos identify Michelin XYZ tires. And the tires on his car are not the same tires. Everybody's thinking, okay, well, should be dropped, right? Charges should be dropped. The trial, however, does not go in his favor. When asked, the victim points out Steve in the courtroom as the man responsible for her assault. They actually have her get off of the stand, go and get as close as she can to him to look him in the face, as she's crying and visibly upset doing this, to identify him.
That just seems psychotic.
It seems unreal. Like, why would you do that? Not only is she traumatized, and I'm sure does not want to look who she thinks is her attacker in the face, but then in front of the court, in front of the judge, in front of the jury, what does this look like?
It looks like winning for her.
Right. Steve's attorney tried to bring to light that the photos of Steve that were mixed in with the other men were smaller, and that this may be why they stood out more to the victim. They did not look the same as mugshots. They were, your regular developed 4x6, as where mugshots are usually 5x7, 8x10. They were even able to get a psychologist to give testimony that, due to a biased lineup with these weird photos, the victim probably could have given false information and really not realized that she, subconsciously was drawn to these different photos.
Yeah.
Right. It was also mentioned that not only did Steve not own a three-piece suit, he didn't own a suit in general. He didn't own a suit.
That's not funny, but it's a little funny.
It's funny. This three-piece suit is really the shit. I'm just saying. But he didn't have a suit, period. He didn't have a suit and tie. He didn't have a suit. He didn't have a two-piece suit, let alone a three-piece suit.
What the hell?
Right. A witness for the prosecution, who was a friend of the victim, testified that she saw the victim leave the coffee shop where she worked at 6:20 p.m. In her statement to police, that time was changed to 7 p.m. The victim herself also had different timelines than in her statements. She claimed she got a ride from the attacker at 6:45, but on the stand, she said it was 6:30. She also changed the numbers she remembered of the temporary license plate in the window of the car from either 667 or 776 to 677. Conveniently, 677 were the last three numbers in Steve Titus's temporary license plate. What wasn't mentioned is that over 1,000 plates from car sales in September also had the numbers 667 or 677.
Jesus.
And what has me most confused is the testimony from a person working in the state crime lab. The specialist stated that there was no evidence that the victim had ever been in Steve Titus's Chevy Chevette. Ever. The defense also was able to prove that a long-distance phone call was made from Titus's apartment at 6:50 p.m. And this is back in the day when your phone bill with all of your charges would get mailed out to you.
Yeah.
So if it happened on that bill, if you made the phone call, it came to you in a bill in paper form.
Yeah.
And it would say the times, start and finish, and how much the rate was per minute, and how much the total call was. Very plain and simple.
Yep.
Right at the time that Titus claimed he got home was about the time at 6:50 when this long-distance phone call was made. He then, right after that, a friend came over at about 7 p.m. who testified on the stand that he was there until about 9:20 when he and Titus both left because Titus had to go pick up his fiance from her job. The prosecution sidestepped those, little details and the changes in time and just kind of ignored it. Also ignored that the tires were not a match and that evidence just plain did not substantiate their claims. In a very bullshit move, the detective who worked the case and was involved at the scene claimed that the photos submitted to the state lab were not the correct ones because it was a mistake that he took photos of the wrong tire tracks because the tire tracks in the photos that were presented showed the tires moving to the right a little bit. But the victim had claimed that the car came straight in on that dirt road and back straight out of the road. I don't know about you, but, when I've been engaging in some sexual activity in a car, the wheel might turn a little bit, especially if you're in some bucket seats.
Yeah.
That wheel might turn, meaning that the wheels may turn a little bit.
I think that's how a car works.
I mean, I think that's how it works. And I'm just going to say right then and, there, not that I know much about it, but I know that when you move the wheel, the tires move.
Yes.
And if you're attacking somebody in the other seat and having them engage in a sexual act with you, chances are you're moving that wheel. I'm just saying.
Probably.
I mean, that's just my thought. I don't know shit, though. So, I should have been a lawyer.
Oh, God.
Can you imagine?
No.
Oh, that would be so great, though.
You'd be like fighting people left and right.
Yeah, I'd be held in contempt of court all day. I probably would get disbarred like within my first week of actually being on a case.
Yeah.
Yeah. All my hopes and dreams going up in flames here. So, yeah, these photos that he took couldn't have been the right tire tracks. I'm just wanting to know, if she pointed you to where the car was, how many tire tracks were out there then?
And why didn't you get the correct ones?
And why didn't you take photos of all of them?
Isn't that your job?
Right. I mean, if you saw tire tracks, take them all.
True.
Take them all. What? Doesn't matter? No, take them all. You've got film to waste. It's not on your dime.
Yeah.
Shit. I don't know why you wouldn't. Take photos of everything.
Yeah.
So, that was a mistake, and that explains away why the tires aren't a match to his car, because he didn't photograph the right tracks.
Okay.
Right. So when it was time for the jury to deliberate, it did take a couple of rounds and people almost acquitted him. However, by the third round of voting, Steve Titus was found guilty as the man who had been responsible for her assault that night. And he was convicted on March 4th, 1981 of first-degree rape. But Steve wasn't giving up. The police had failed to get the real man who had done this crime. He knew he didn't do it. And he knew that he just couldn't sit back and do nothing. His life was at stake. The first-degree rape charge has a mandatory prison sentence.
Yeah.
And he could have been in there as little as 3 years or as much as 20 years. That's a long time for somebody who knows that they didn't commit a crime.
Yeah.
So he began working tirelessly, driving along the Pacific Highway looking for cars that matched the description and following them.
That makes me sad.
Right? He would keep track of the license plates. He would, see the drivers that got out of the cars, and if it matched the man that the victim described, he would keep track of that car and that license plate. He spent hours looking through logs of sales of new cars at dealerships for the month of September of 1980, searching for sales that, over 25 different dealerships in the area of the Pacific Highway. That could not even be where this car had been bought.
Yeah.
But he had nothing else to go on. And he spent so much time trying to do the police's job that it's just depressing.
It makes me so sad.
Right. Because he had nobody else. He had nobody else but himself to do it. Steve goes over the police reports in his spare time and the statements given to the police. And he, at one point, logs like 70 discrepancies between all of these things. And he is hoping that he will get a new trial because of this.
Yeah.
He does not, because they tell him it has to be new evidence that comes to light before he can get a new trial. And just because he's saying that things don't match up in these police reports and these statements, that's not new evidence. Meanwhile, he hires a private detective, like a private investigator, to look into the same things that he's looking into to see if any new information comes to light that will make it possible to get a new trial. That is fruitless as well. Nothing comes of that. Financially, he basically goes bankrupt.
Oh my gosh.
His lawyer fees, the private investigator fees, and the bail bond that kept him out of jail until his sentencing was about $14,000 in 1980.
Yeah.
And although Ivers says that they support his claims of innocence and they wanted to back him, he is unfortunately let go from his job in May because they're saying that the emotional toll that this took on him, he could not perform his job duties because he was so focused on proving his innocence.
I mean, maybe so, but
I'm
still.
sure. I'm sure he was. I'm sure that was his sole focus in life, was to keep himself out of jail, out of prison at this point. And how is he going to do that and work a full-time job? Well, he's not.
That is a full-time job.
Right.
That's somebody else's job.
Right. He still does not give up, even though he is now, unemployed. His appeal lawyer brings this case to the attention of a local journalist, Paul Henderson, who is very interested in how badly this has gone with so many of the details in question. I mean, there's just a lot of details that they don't match.
Yeah.
Because of concerns and questions that are raised by the Seattle Times, the police chief reopened the case. And actually, this bought Steve a month of extra time before his sentencing hearing. This information would eventually break the case wide open, and I'll get to that in a moment. But the outcome of that special investigation, into the officers and if they had done any wrongdoing, and, this police chief was like, your ass is on the line. You're all fucking fired if I find out that there's anything wrong. They are all found innocent of any wrongdoing. The police chief says that they investigated and nobody did anything that's wrong. He can't say that anybody, stepped out of line with this case and this investigation. It's very convenient.
Yeah.
Yeah. The information the journalist from the Seattle Times gave to the police department was a very important piece of information that had been overlooked. If somebody had just been doing their job, they would have probably found the same information. And that is that that same area, that same dirt road off of, Pacific Highway, about 6 days prior to the assault on the 17-year-old in question, there was a similar assault reported by a 15-year-old girl.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. There are similarities in the description, the car, all of it, the location. You would think that the police would have a report of something that they investigated. You would think. From
Possibly.
Just 6 days prior.
That it would, ring a bell.
But given that, they didn't even type up the statement until 2 days before the trial for Steve that he gave in October and the trial was in February. I don't know. Maybe they hadn't typed up that report yet. And I am being very sarcastic for a reason here. This is some bullshit. Like, police, I know that they do their job. I understand that there are police that they don't do their job, and this is the shit that happens. Wrong people get convicted. But there are, for just as many times as this happened, there are police out there that really are invested in their job and they work to the betterment of the community. And, they don't do bullshit like this.
Yeah.
This police department, whatever the fuck was going on here in the 80s, fuck off. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Outrageous.
Yeah. So Paul Henderson ended up writing a couple of articles on this. One article he wrote was called, quote, "One Man's Battle to Clear His Name." And he wrote this for the Seattle Times. It went to print on May 14th, 1981. This was just days before the sentencing hearing. And in it, he spelled out the details of the case and, where it stood at that time. A lot of information was made public in that article, and that alone should have raised a lot of concerns to anybody that read it being the judge, being, the jury, anything like that. Anybody that read this article, me reading it today, all these years later, if even half of what this journalist wrote and Steve was saying was the case, if even half of it was accurate, even one detail being accurate in all of those details and all of those concerns, that is enough to raise a red flag to me. There was just so much that was wrong, and details and timeline was wrong, and how the trial proceeded, all of it. There's just too many things to not question.
Yeah. And
I don't know that his article really caused any public outcry is the problem. I want to say it did, but I also want to say that just because of his looking into other things and finding that information about that other assault that took place just days before, it's really because of him that anything came to fruition. So, and it was just what Steve needed. So there is an eventual arrest and sentencing of the real person who committed this crime and the other crime, both of them. Edward Lee King was eventually arrested and sentenced for both crimes after he admitted his guilt. It never would have happened if Paul Henderson had not found out about that other assault. Never would have happened. Steve Titus would have been sentenced to a crime he didn't commit. And it's depressing how close of a call that came to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that he didn't actually get sentenced or locked up.
He did have to spend one night in jail. I did read that.
One night.
One night, yeah. Thankfully that is it.
Yeah. I'm just glad that he wasn't serving years.
Right. Which is, that's more usually the case.
Yeah.
Is that it takes years and years and years after a conviction, appeals being denied, things not going in the person's favor. And then all of a sudden, oh, would you look at that?
Yeah.
We suddenly know who did it. After you've taken years of somebody's life.
Yeah.
I mean, this poor gentleman, his life is never going to be the same after this. Doesn't matter if if he's found innocent, guilty, if the conviction is overturned. It doesn't matter, because to the public, he's already been accused. He's already been convicted, and he's lost his job. His whatever financial support he had is gone.
Yeah.
And, in the end, he is always going to be this convicted person. No matter, in people's eyes,
Yeah.
no matter what gets changed, it's the perception.
And I'm sure the mental effect that would have on you, you'd always be looking over your shoulder, I feel like.
Right.
Because distrust.
Well, right. Because you are going about your life in an everyday manner, and you think you're cooperating with the police to help solve a crime, a horrible crime. Now you can't trust that you can even be a helpful member of society.
Yeah.
You can't trust that you can go about your daily life and not be, just completely the rug pulled from underneath your feet.
Yeah.
At any time, at any moment.
I think that would have a lasting effect where you'd always be looking over your shoulder.
Right. There's definitely some PTSD.
Yeah.
There for sure. Thankfully, the victim was very remorseful. She is the only one out of the prosecutor, the judge, the police, the detectives that actually is remorseful about her part in him being convicted.
Fuck all them.
I mean, yeah. His conviction was overturned and the charges were dismissed against him. He gave information after, he gave an interview afterwards, and he said, quote, "I lost my fiance because I spent so much time dwelling on this.
Oh my gosh.
And I've changed. I'm not the person she knew. I lost my job. My family lost their savings, $9,000. I owe $3,000 to my attorney." He basically is just, a broken man at this point. And he was barely 31 years old when this happened. He had a whole ass life ahead of him. I can't even imagine.
That's so sad.
It's very sad. Titus filed a lawsuit $20 million lawsuit against the Port of Seattle police alleging their wrongdoing that led to his conviction, wrongful conviction. It accused the officer who was in charge, the detective, of, quote, gross negligence and intentional disregard for the constitutional rights of Titus. What is the most depressing thing out of all of this is Titus died of a heart attack on February 2nd, 1985, while the case was still pending.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So several months after that, the lawsuit was settled out of court, and his teenage son, which really I have no other information on his son. I'm not sure who the mom was or anything. He was awarded $2.8 million in damages on behalf of his father. $2.8 million out of 20.
Yeah. That's still a lot of money, but it's just...
So, I mean, this poor guy, probably the stress of just everything, culminated in him dying of a heart attack.
Which, none of it ever had to happen.
None of it ever had to happen. And this is why wrongful conviction cases, they need to be discussed more, because it should be reviewed. It's like, when there's suspected medical malpractice, there's a review board. It goes in front of a bunch of people, and a lot of people will say, okay, let's start here. What went wrong first, and then go from there. And they will really fine-tooth comb this shit, and they will really go through and look at where the mistakes were made. And then policies and procedures and training are put in place to prevent that again.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there is some type of way that the police have about going about that kind of same situation. What are you doing to fix it? This is 1980 that this happened. What are you doing to fix it? It's 2022. You can't tell me there aren't wrongful convictions still and that it hasn't happened in the last 40 years. There are.
Yeah.
So what is happening to fix it? And this is why it's so frustrating to look at these wrongful conviction cases, because, he could have gone to jail. He could have gone to jail and spent, the rest of his days in a cell and not gotten any vindication.
Yeah.
He could have gone on to live the rest of his life and maybe he still would have had a heart attack or not, but he wouldn't have had the stress of all of this.
Yeah.
It's sad. It's sad that he was lost in more ways than one, He lost his life in more ways than one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. The article that Paul Henderson wrote went on to be a Pulitzer Prize winning article for him.
Wow.
And he actually was involved in, up until he passed away, he was involved in, from the journalist aspect of wrongful convictions and working to get people's information out there and to help find information that might help them overturn their convictions. And I really have to applaud him. He wasn't, a lot of journalists are like, it's like everything. There are people who want to do their job, and then there are people who want to be recognized for doing a job and just seek the glory.
Yeah.
And I commend him for really putting to use his skills, his resources.
Yeah.
And trying to do that for other people who have been wrongfully convicted. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, I think that was really cool of him. And like I said, if he hadn't have found that information, that one little bit of information that was out there that should have been something that the police should have looked at.
Should have been first base.
I mean, I feel like.
Yeah. I feel like when we talk about stories a lot, that is one of the first things that gets looked at. Is this crime similar to other ones in this area?
Yeah.
I feel like that's a starting point.
Especially in the same department. I mean, we're not talking about different counties or different cities that might not, connect. Because, I mean, in the 80s, there was no shared database.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's your same police department. It's the same police force right
Literally
there.
Same place. Same
place.
type of crime.
Just not even a week earlier.
Yeah.
You mean to tell me that nobody communicated there? Nobody?
I mean,
all you do is sit around and bullshit about the cases that you're doing and you're working on. You mean to tell me nobody was like, oh, hey, there was a sexual assault a week ago. And hey, here we have this one. What are you working on today? Oh, yeah, a sexual assault from last week. Oh, really? Me too. Just happened. Please. Come on now. Like, you know that the fucking men talk.
They can't even type up their
and they can't even type
reports.
up their fucking statements. I hope that this was a lesson learned for them. I really hope that this was a lesson learned for that department.
I would hope so too.
Yeah, because you really screwed the pooch on that one. Sorry, for lack of better term. It's horrible. It's just horrible. And then that he passed away. I read that and I was like, fuck.
That makes me so sad because he was spending so much time, trying to prove his innocence, and then
right,
all for naught, basically, just passes away.
I mean, he was in the right path. He was on the right path to getting his life back.
But I fully believe that it was all of the stress of everything.
I really feel that way too.
I think that he probably would have lived longer had this not happened to him, or
probably
gone a different way.
Because let's face it, because he ended up, after the conviction was overturned, in like $2,000 or $10,000 worth of debt. I read in 1980 that's quite a big chunk of change.
When even
right now, $10,000. It's not like I can pull that out of my ass, But yeah, when you have no job, your reputation is tainted. So you going and finding another job that is going to be comparable to the job that you had, that's iffy. That's iffy. You've already borrowed money from your family that you can't repay.
Yeah.
And where do you go from there? What do you do from that? The end of Paul Henderson's article basically ends like, well, he's on unemployment now and looking for a job. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like this story.
I'm sorry. I don't like it either. But this is why we're sharing it, because as we get into the series that we're going to do with True Crime Cat Lawyer, this is just scratching the surface.
I'm sure.
There are convictions that, people have been on death row and been put to death on wrongful convictions. And it has a lot, not everything, but it has a lot. The one common denominator in a lot of these stories is the police work involved, honestly, because prosecutors will take what the police have gotten and they take and run through that trial and with pressing charges. You can't say that they're not involved in it, but it starts with police work.
Yeah.
And when the police work is shit, your whole case is shit.
I also just wonder about the jury in this specific case.
Yeah.
I
do too.
About them.
I really do too. How do you not question that there's inconsistencies? I think you're so overwhelmed and siding with the victim because she is so overwhelmed in the courtroom identifying her would-be attacker. I think that left more of a lasting impression on them than the fact that she couldn't get the time that she got into the car, that she left the coffee shop to correlate with the time that her friend, the waitress working at the coffee shop, said she left, who also couldn't correlate the time. Nobody thought about that, apparently, you know?
They were playing to people's emotions. They knew what they were doing.
I don't know. I would hope not. She was a victim of a crime. I don't want to think that she was, I just don't know if the police didn't feed her and say, we know it's this guy and he's trying to plead innocent. So, here's what you need to say. I don't know that didn't happen.
I would hope that didn't happen. I just think the prosecution definitely knew what they were doing.
Oh, I'm sure.
Playing to people's emotions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I absolutely agree. Because their job is to get a conviction.
Yeah.
And otherwise, especially if they're like a elected person,
It's just
they could give a fuck.
With all the facts not really matching up, I just feel like that was their last ditch effort, you know?
Right.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. This one was hard. It's hard. My heart goes out to this guy and his family who had to watch him go through this.
Yeah.
And couldn't do anything to help him. Tried and couldn't do anything to help him. I hate it. I absolutely hate it.
I don't like this.
I don't like it. Let us know your thoughts on this one, guys. And hopefully this is, just a taste of what we get into with Elise from True Crime Cat Lawyer. She is a practicing lawyer. She does not practice criminal law. However, she has a lot of, she's able to go into a lot of detail of the law, the trial, and things like that I can't always get or I can't always answer. I have my thoughts, I have my opinions, and I can research, but it's nice to hear from her. Like, it's nice to hear from that point of view and that aspect of things.
Yeah.
To me, like, listening to her on her podcast really helps me to take a look at what I should be looking at. Like, it kind of highlights things that I don't always think of and things that, where else can I look for information? And I really enjoy listening to her because of that. So everybody should go check her out before we release our 2-part episode with her. And there will be monthly episodes after that. We decided that it was too good and there was too many cases to go over and talk about. We had a hard time narrowing it down to just talk about the one case that we decided to do. And we just thought, let's just do them all. Let's just do them all because there's tons and they all deserve to be talked about. And these people deserve to have that information out there that they are not guilty. And, have people rethink how they look at people who have been, not only people who have been convicted and wrongfully convicted and then had that overturned, but also society needs to start looking at people that have served their time and gone on to be productive members of society.
Yeah. You
can fuck some shit up because you're young and stupid and then go on to, and you've served your time, you've done your commitment to going on and, you've served your time and you can get out and still be treated like a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I know that's a hard topic to get into discuss, and I won't do that right now, but I think looking at that is along the same lines.
Yeah.
People don't want to, they think that if you went through the system and the system found you guilty, then you're guilty and you're just a piece of shit for the rest of your life.
Yeah, but people are not their crimes.
Right. Exactly. And there are, for just as many people who are caught and convicted, there are plenty of people in life that never get caught and convicted, and nobody thinks of them any differently.
Or just plain pieces of shit that may not even be committing crimes.
Yeah, they're just pieces of shit. They're everywhere. All right, guys. Well, thank you again for listening. We always appreciate you guys, and we know taking your time out, just to listen to us ramble on about some true crime is, we're here for it. We love it. We're going to continue doing it, and we hope you enjoy it too. So, as always, we want to say thank you, stay safe, and stay out of the damn woods.
Stay out of the woods.
Yeah, and stay off Pacific Highway too. It's no good. Bye, guys.
Peace out.